Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky is exposing the deep state and how we were basically all caught up in a global COVID war to try to destroy our freedoms and give government unabashed, unfettered authority over us. And so I want to show you a video that went viral just a couple of days ago where Senator Rand Paul is talking to Wendy Sherman from the State Department. He's going to expose how neither Dr. Fauci, nor the military, nor President Biden, or the White House, or anyone in Washington, D.C. wants to get to the bottom of what really happened with COVID, the origin of COVID, and why nobody is actively investigating this. In fact, he points out how they are actively blocking FOIA requests, testimonials, subpoenas. Nobody wants to get to the bottom of this. And so he goes through and he shares some really terrifying things going on in Washington, D.C., and Miss Sherman is completely speechless. She can't defend herself. She doesn't know what to do. And then at the end, she says something that's truly terrifying, and it shows you that they know something and that they are actively working to cover it up. Let's go ahead and watch the tape.
Thank you, Senator Paul.
Mr. Sherman, it's estimated that between 5 and 18 million people died from COVID-19 worldwide. To a significant number of scientists, the evidence suggests that this originated from a lab leak in Wuhan. Does the State Department fund coronavirus research in China?
Do we fund coronavirus? I don't believe so, but I don't know. I'll double check and we'll get back to you on that, Senator.
The answer is yes, you do. And it's been going on for more than a decade, and it's done through a program called PREDICT and then the Global Virome. And why this is important is we had 1 million Americans die, and we really haven't had any discussion of this. No hearings, nothing. People are unaware that they're even funding the research. We found out recently through the House unclassified report that money is going from the NIH to American universities to the Academy of Military Medical Sciences Research in China. We are subcontracting money and sending it over, but millions is coming from the State Department. So the idea is this: we will identify all the viruses in the world, and we'll be safer because we identified them. But here's the question: are we safer to have some guy or some woman crawling down a cave 10 hours away from Wuhan, coming up with bat guano, coming up with viruses, and bringing it to a city of 15 million like Wuhan? This is what's been going on for a decade. It's a setup for an accident. It's a setup for a mistake. And nobody's doing anything about it. We continue to fund it. The main group that's been getting this money is EcoHealth Alliance, over $100 million, a lot of it through the State Department. They continue to get money. They don't file their reports on time. They didn't stop their experiments, and yet we reward them with more money. 15 million people died, and we haven't done a thing about it. Nobody seems to care. We're not even sure we fund it. The State Department's a big funder of this project. It's a multi-decade-long project, but there are scientists, as we speak, from Stanford, from MIT, from prestigious universities around the country. These are not partisans. Most of them are not Republicans who stand up and say, oh my God, what are we doing? Bringing these viruses from remote bat caves to major metropolitan areas and with no controls over this. So we've been asking for information from the State Department because we want to know more about this. U.S. Right to Know has been sending FOIA requests for 2.5 years, and they don't get anything. So, Mr. Chairman, I've sent 2 letters. Some of them are 6 months old now, and we get whatever, we're not going to give you any information. What I would hope for is that we could have, people always talk about bipartisanship. Could we not get bipartisan support for records? This is not partisan. We want to know what the U.S. State Department is funding. NIH resists our requests on their funds. The 2 things that we know for certain that have led us to believe this came from the lab that are big came because one was leaked, and this was a DARPA request. So the Chinese researchers in China wanted from DARPA money to create a virus that, guess what, looks exactly like COVID-19. They asked for it in 2018. We turned them down. Fortunately, we did the right thing for once. We turned them down. That doesn't mean they didn't do the research. And so many scientists at an aha moment, they saw this and they said, Oh my goodness, they asked for money to create something that looks almost exactly what we got. So in nature, you do not have coronaviruses that infect people that have what is called a furin cleavage site. Chinese said, give us money, we were going to stick a furin cleavage site to allow it to infect humans more. We found out that not because you let us know, or not because the NIH let us know, they still resist. This is top secret. This is classified. This is the whole problem of classification, but it's also to cover up things.
Okay, so just to pause, I hate to interrupt, but you really have to ask yourself, why does nobody want to get to the bottom of the COVID situation? So as he points out, 1 million people supposedly died of COVID in the United States, about 15 million worldwide, and yet no government wants to get to the bottom of what really happened. This cost Americans more than World War I and World War II combined. We literally spent over $5 trillion on a world global health event, and nobody wants to get to the bottom of this. Dr. Fauci wants to ride off into the sunset, unscathed by his policies and his recommendations, and he has no interest in finding out why this happened, where it really came from, and how to prevent it from happening again. Also, the Biden White House, they're not looking into this. They say this is the biggest tragedy that has ever happened, and yet nobody wants to get to the bottom of this. So the question is why? What is the real motivation? Why does nobody want to get to the bottom of this? Okay, let's get back to this.
So we don't know anything about the 28th thing, but we had an illegal leak that went to somebody in the media that's now public that said the Chinese wanted to create a virus just like COVID-19 in 2018. The other thing we know is 3 researchers in the Wuhan lab, in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, got very sick with flu-like symptoms similar to COVID in November. We only know that, though, because the Trump administration on the way out declassified it. So we have to get over all the classification. We also have to be more forthcoming. And I'm hoping the chairman will consider looking at our requests. These are not partisan. We want to know all the information about funding of research in China. We want to know the interactions. There were cables going back and forth between the State Department saying, holy cow, they're not wearing gloves, they don't wear masks and doing this research. They're doing it in what's called a BSL-2 as opposed to a BSL-4. Most of the research that we think escaped was not done in the appropriate lab. And the State Department knew about it, but we've had no hearings about this. They refused to give us information. 15 million people died, 1 million Americans died, and you won't give us information. So what I would ask is look at our request. This isn't partisan. This should be about discovering the origins of this. The scientific community is about 50-50 now, and I would hope that we suspect the Chinese of not being honest and withholding information, but it's sad that the U.S. government is withholding information from its representatives.
I'll take back your request again, Senator. I would urge a briefing perhaps in a SCIF with the intelligence community on this, because as you know, there is not a single view about this particular set of issues, but I understand your desire to understand what occurred.
We're asking you for unclassified information that you hold, not the intel.
I understand that.
Okay, so we've now learned that the State Department was absolutely funding gain-of-function research. They just told them, you can't call it gain-of-function research and you can't do this. But he points out that $100 million was given to the EcoHealth Alliance and other groups through Dr. Anthony Fauci, and also through the State Department, and also through the military. And then what she just said is fascinating. She says, Senator Paul, we might want to have a intel briefing with higher up people in a SCIF. Now, a SCIF is a room that is completely blocked from cell phones, satellites, spy equipment. If President Biden or Trump or Obama want to get information, they have to go into a SCIF to get that. Wherever they are in the world, they take a portable one. And then at the White House and also in the Capitol and different parts of Washington, D.C., they have these. So she's saying, I have information to share with you, but it can only be shared inside of a SCIF. So what is it that you think is the real motivation between actively blocking this and having information that they do not want the American people to know?